The Science Directorate of the Galactic Union, notorious for their overconfidence and a habit of underestimating non-Union technology, announced a firm decision to tackle the enigmas of planet CL-21. This wasn't about conquering in the old-fashioned sense. Such acts had lost favor since the Snar block debacle, where the Snar turned out to be more adept at ankle attacks than submission. This time, it was about a scientific triumph, spearheaded by the brightest intellects from across the galaxy. The planet, deemed hostile by human scouts, was merely seen as a minor challenge by the Directorate. They dismissed reports of aggressively biting grass, unusually hostile penguins, and squirrels known ominously as the ultimate rulers of their domain as mere human hyperbole, a species that celebrated attaching rockets to themselves as a form of space exploration. The Union's team included the cream of its scientific community, selected for their sharp intelligence and a notable deficiency in imagination, a quality the Director found beneficial for tasks that demanded rational focus. Among them were Dr. Frol Naren, a xenobotany expert famed for his prolonged argument with a flora specimen; Dr. Giali's Plan, a physicist whose intellect once momentarily negated the law of gravity in a lecture; and the enigmatic Zorit Pan, a xenoanthropologist viewed by his peers as peculiarly eccentric. Zorit was the sole team member to bring a strange human relic, a worn manual penned by a certain Bob on surviving Class 13 environments. When questioned, Zorit simply remarked, "Humans, while bizarre, tend to survive the odds. I prefer to be prepared." Their vessel, the Inquirer's Purpose, touched down on Class 13 with a robust thud, which the pilot reassured was standard procedure. The planet presented a false sense of calm, with its verdant hills under a subtly purple sky. A breeze hinted at floral scents that could equally signal peril. Upon disembarking, they were met by a holographic sign that sprang to life, cheerily singing, "Welcome to Class 13," followed by a caution to adhere to the guidelines or face regretful consequences. Dr. Naren scoffed at the sign, dismissing it as a crude joke. Zorit, however, took a moment to read the finer details, advising caution around the flora and fauna. "Quaint," remarked Zorit sarcastically, slipping Bob's survival guide into his bag, suspecting its usefulness might soon be tested. The group swiftly established their base, with Dr. PL confirming the air's purity. However, a burst of pollen from a nearby plant soon induced a fierce sneeze from Dr. PL, to which the plant responded with a peculiar giggle. "Did that plant just mock me?" PL inquired, his cheeks burning with indignation. "Not exactly," Zorit responded, browsing Bob's guide. "It's ridiculing you," he corrected, pointing to a passage in the manual. Chapter 4 mentions not to taunt the giggle weed. As the initial day unfolded, confusion mounted. Nant tried to examine a segment of grass, only to jerk back as it bit at her fingers. "Incredible. Plants shouldn't have fangs," she protested. Zorit, referencing the manual, advised, according to page 12, the grass dislikes unwanted touches. By evening, the team had largely dismissed both the holographic advisories and Bob's manual as human jests, all except Zorit, who seemed to understand the bizarre rules of this world, though he remained puzzled by its mysteries. While reviewing the guide in his tent, he noticed a note scribbled in the margins. "If you're still reading this, well done. Most don't get this far. Beware it worsens." He puzzled over this. What's worse than carnivorous grass? He wondered aloud. Just then, a distant roar followed by a piercing honk filled the air, making Zorit jump. Was that a duck? The next morning on Class 13 was ushered in by an unsettling mix of sounds, including a deep, gurgling bellow and the crisp honk of what must be those notorious ducks Bob had mentioned. Dr. Naren was already outside, observing the grass. "It's taller today," she announced, poking it with a device that emitted frustrated beeps, as though irritated by the absurdity before it. Zorit, cautious of the grass, reminded her, "Didn't Bob warn about provoking it?" "Bob's advice is madness," Naren retorted, determined not to cower before vegetation. At that moment, the grass snatched her scanner, gulping it down before settling back innocently. "Did the grass just swallow my device?" she gasped, disbelief in her eyes. "Yes," Zorit confirmed, referencing the guide. Page 15 warns not to underestimate the grass. "So where?" Before Naren could dispute how absurd the notion of sentient grass was, Dr. PL approached them hurriedly, clutching a journal. "There's a creek nearby, and the water is..." He suddenly grimaced, clutching his belly as a peculiar gurgling sound emerged. "You didn't drink the water, did you?" Zorit interjected with concern. "It appeared pristine," PL insisted, now bent over in discomfort. Zorit consulted the guide again. Chapter 6 warns never to trust overly pristine water. Before anyone could inquire further, PL hiccuped and began to levitate slightly off the ground. "This is preposterous," Naren grumbled, trying unsuccessfully to pull him down by the ankle, only to watch him drift higher like a perturbed balloon. "It should be temporary," Zorit noted, scanning the manual, "though it advises to steer clear of anything sharp. It seems floating could make you burst. The inflatable PL. PL cried out, his arms flailing as he floated higher. From then on, the expedition's challenges only intensified. A cluster of seemingly benign flowers emitted a spray that caused Naren to dance uncontrollably for half an hour, while PL found himself stuck up a tree, besieged by squirrels demanding shiny objects as tribute. Zorit, find something useful in that book. Fast, PL yelled, his voice muffled as he bobbed through the air like a lost balloon. Zorit scanned the manual frantically, his fingers sliding down the page as he searched for any mention of a retreat strategy. Here it is, he exclaimed, relief washing over his face. Chapter 41. In the event of a penguin siege, create a diversion. Loud noises or bright lights can temporarily disorient them. Naren dug through her backpack, pulling out a handheld flare gun. This has to work, she said, her hands trembling as she prepared the flare. With a sharp click and a whoosh, the flare soared into the air, bursting into a brilliant cascade of sparks above them. The penguins halted, momentarily stunned by the dazzling display. Their red eyes blinked against the bright light, and their honking subsided into confused chirps. Seizing the moment, Zorit led the charge, guiding Naren and the still-floating PL towards a rocky incline. As they climbed, Naren glanced back to see the penguins shaking off their stupor. They're recovering. Hurry, she shouted, her voice edged with panic. The trio scrambled up the slope, the uneven terrain making their escape even more desperate. Reaching the top, they found a narrow ledge that offered a precarious moment of safety. Below, the penguins regrouped, their honks now filled with frustration as they peered up at their quarry. PL, finally descending to the ground as his floating spell wore off, gasped for air. I never thought I'd be running from penguins, he panted, his face flushed with the absurdity of their situation. Zorit, still clutching the manual, nodded gravely. Neither did I, but Bob's guide hasn't steered us wrong yet. He flipped to another page, searching for anything that might help them further. It says here, the penguins may lose interest if they cannot reach their target quickly. Remain out of reach and stay silent as much as possible. The scientists huddled together, their breaths shallow as they watched the penguins below. The birds milled about, some trying futilely to climb the rocky slope, their flippers ill-suited for such tasks. After what felt like an eternity, the penguins began to disperse, their honks diminishing as they waddled back toward the grasslands. Naren let out a long sigh of relief. I think they're giving up, she whispered, not daring to believe their luck. Zorit peered down, his eyes tracking the retreating figures. Let's not test our luck any further, he advised. We'll wait here a bit longer to make sure they're gone, then head back to camp. We need to reassess our approach to this planet. PL nodded in agreement, his earlier bravado gone. Agreed, and maybe we should actually start following that manual to the letter, he said, a wry smile forming as he glanced at the worn book in Zorit's hands. Naren chuckled weakly, the tension slowly ebbing from her shoulders. From now on, Bob's word is gospel, she declared, half joking but entirely sincere. As the night deepened, the sounds of the planet resumed around them, a wild symphony that no longer seemed quite as threatening, now that they had survived their first real test. The three scientists sat together, watching the stars twinkle above, their ordeal with the penguins already becoming a story they would one day recount with disbelief and laughter. As Naren stormed towards the trees, a high-pitched screech echoed through the air, freezing her in her tracks. She turned slowly to see a group of squirrels lined up on a branch, their small eyes glaring down at her, acorns clutched tightly in their paws. Seriously, she shouted up at them, throwing her hands in the air. The squirrels responded by chattering loudly, a clear sign of their agitation. Zorit hurried over, flipping through the manual as he approached. Page 52, squirrels use high-pitched noises as a warning. If ignored, they escalate their defenses. He looked up just in time to see a volley of acorns rain down towards Naren. Ducking quickly, Naren narrowly avoided the barrage. This is ridiculous, she grumbled, retreating back towards the camp. We're being terrorized by wildlife. Back at the camp, PL struggled against his tether, still floating a few feet off the ground. Can we please figure out how to get me down? He pleaded, his voice edged with frustration. Zorit returned to his side, consulting the manual once again. Let's see, he muttered, thumbing through the pages. Ah, here it is, Chapter 19, Remedies for Unwanted Levitation. He read quickly, then looked up with a hopeful expression. It says here that grounding yourself with a conductive material might help dissipate the static charge. Naren fetched a length of wire from their supplies and handed it to Zorit, who wrapped one end around PL's ankle and attached the other end to a large metal box. After a few tense moments, PL began to descend slowly until his feet touched the ground. Finally, he sighed in relief, stepping away from the box. The team sat down, exhausted exhausted and wary, as the sun began to rise, casting long shadows across the chaotic campsite. "We need a better plan," Naren stated flatly. "This isn't sustainable." Zorit nodded, still clutching Bob's manual. "Agreed, but we should also prepare for more than just penguins and squirrels. This planet's ecosystem is interconnected in ways we haven't fully understood yet." As they formulated a new strategy, the early morning light revealed more about their surroundings. The vegetation seemed to watch them, and the sounds of the wildlife created a constant backdrop of eerie noises. It was clear that every step they took would have to be cautious and calculated. "We'll need to set up surveillance and maybe some kind of deterrent," PL suggested, rubbing his sore ankle. "And we need to keep a better watch on our equipment." Naren, still irritated but now more determined, began organizing what remained of their supplies. "Let's make a list of priorities. First, we secure the camp. Then, we figure out a way to coexist with whatever is out there." Zorit, looking over the manual one more time, added, "And I'll keep this close. It's been more helpful than I could have imagined." He tapped the cover of Bob's guide. Bob might have been eccentric, but he understood this place better than we did. As they set to work under the watchful eyes of the planet's denizens, the team knew they were in for a long and challenging expedition. But with each other's support and the quirky wisdom of Bob's manual, they were ready to face whatever challenges Class 13 had in store. "We have to stay, at least for a little longer. We've got a mission to complete," Zorit insisted, though his voice betrayed his own uncertainty. "Besides, we need to understand more about this ecosystem if we're ever going to prevent future incidents." Naren rubbed her temples, clearly exhausted. "Okay, but let's make it quick, and let's stick together. No more wandering off. We can't afford any more surprises." PL, still bobbing slightly in the air, muttered, "I'm all for sticking together, especially if it keeps us away from any more psychoducks or whatever Bob's guide will throw at us next." The team spent the next few hours reinforcing their camp and setting up more robust surveillance equipment, hoping to catch early warnings of any approaching threats. They also devised a system of quick retreats and makeshift shelters, preparing for the worst. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the camp, Zorit gathered everyone for a quick meeting. "We need to prioritize our research. Let's focus on gathering what we need and then make plans to leave. We've seen enough to know that prolonged exposure to this planet's fauna isn't wise." Naren nodded, looking over the maps and data they had collected so far. "Agreed. Let's compile what we have on the flora and fauna interactions, the strange behaviors, and any samples we can safely collect. We'll need all the data we can get to understand this place, even if we don't want to stay long." PL floated next to them, tethered to a heavy equipment case. "And let's keep an eye on that manual. It's been eerily accurate so far. Maybe it can help us avoid any other local customs." The night passed uneasily, with each noise from the dark forest around them causing jumps and startled looks. But no ducks or squirrels launched any new attacks, and the large predatory grass remained at bay. By morning, the team had collected a significant amount of data and prepared for a quick departure. As they packed up, Zorit took one last look at Bob's manual. "You know, we should consider publishing something about this place. The Survival Guide to Planet CL-21 by Galactic Union scientists. It would be a bestseller after what we've been through." Naren chuckled, her mood lightening for the first time in days. "Only if we make it back to the Union to tell the tale. Let's get out of here and back to civilization, where the most dangerous thing we have to deal with is a faulty coffee machine." With their equipment packed and their spirits cautiously optimistic, the team made their way back to their ship, each step away from the planet lightening their burden. As they boarded, Zorit gave one last glance back at the wild, bizarre world they were leaving behind. "Goodbye, Planet CL-21. Let's not do this again," he muttered, securing the hatch behind him. The ship lifted off, leaving the planet's surface and its unpredictable inhabitants behind. Inside, the team breathed a collective sigh of relief, ready to analyze their findings in the safety of their orbital lab. The mysteries of Planet CL-21 would continue to perplex them, but for now, they were just glad to be going home. And Naren echoed incredulously, her club hanging limply by her side now. "Yes," FLI continued, its limbs moving in a fluid, unsettling dance as it played the ukulele. "To survive here, one must understand the rhythm of this world, not just its dangers." Bob danced, "And so shall you." Zorit, Naren, and PL exchanged a bewildered glance. "We dance, or what?" Zorit asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Or you remain here, with me, forever serenaded by the melodies of my ukulele," FLI intoned, a hint of mischief, or was it malice, in its voice. "Right, dancing it is, then," PL muttered, trying to stabilize his floating as he awkwardly moved his limbs. Zorit set the manual down, taking a deep breath. "Okay, let's do this." For Bob, he began to awkwardly sway sway, trying to match his movements to the bizarre tunes emanating from FLI's ukulele. Naren, sighing deeply, joined in. She moved stiffly at first, her movements more survival instinct than rhythm, but gradually began to find a beat in the strange music. As they danced, FLI played on, the melody becoming less jarring and more harmonious. The creature's head ceased its chaotic swirling and settled into a smooth, rhythmic motion that seemed to guide the scientist's steps. After what felt like an eternity but was only a few minutes, FLI ceased playing and nodded its head, now stable and coherent. "You have passed," it declared. "Bob was wise to teach the dance. It is the essence of life here, a harmony with the planet that few understand." Zorit, panting and sweaty, managed a weak smile. "So, we can go now?" "Yes, you may leave," FLI responded, its voice softening. "And take this knowledge with you. Dance with the universe, not against it." With a final strum of its ukulele, FLI retreated back into the forest, disappearing as mysteriously as it had appeared. The team collapsed, relieved but exhausted. "I never want to dance again," Naren declared, half joking. PL, finally back on solid ground, chuckled weakly. "I'll take dancing over floating any day." Zorit picked up Bob's manual, flipping through it one last time. "This guide saved us, but next time, I'm adding a chapter on dancing with alien guardians." As they prepared to leave, the planet seemed less hostile, almost peaceful. They boarded their ship, each carrying not just data but a profound new respect for the rhythms of life and survival. "Next mission, let's pick a planet with less dancing," PL quipped as the ship lifted off. "And fewer ukuleles," Naren added, glancing back at the shrinking planet. Zorit smiled, placing Bob's manual carefully in his bag. "Agreed, but let's keep the manual handy, just in case." As the ship soared into the cosmos, they left behind the bizarre challenges of the planet, carrying with them not just scientific discoveries, but a lesson in cosmic harmony that none of them would soon forget. As the ship ascended into the star-speckled darkness of space, Naren leaned against the wall, exhaustion etching deep lines across her face. "I think I need a vacation," she murmured, half joking. PL, finally stable and no longer floating, managed a weak smile. "Make it somewhere without any form of musical instrument, please." Zorit, flipping through Bob's manual one last time, chuckled. "I'm thinking somewhere quiet, a library planet, maybe, where the wildest thing we encounter is a late return." The ship's engine hummed steadily as they left the planet's orbit, the memories of their bizarre dance-off with FLI fading like a strange dream. But the lessons learned were hard to forget. They had survived by embracing the absurdity of their situation, much like Bob had with his unconventional methods. As they set their course back to the Galactic Union, each of them reflected on the ordeal. They had gone to the planet as scientists, intent on observation and data collection, but they had left as survivors who had danced to save their lives. "I'll start drafting our report," Zorit said, pulling up the ship's log. "How do we even classify this? A successful mission? A near disaster? Both," Naren replied, gazing out into the vastness of space. "We got the data and we got out alive. That's more than enough for me. And I'm definitely adding a new chapter to the manual," Zorit continued, "about dealing with musical aliens and the importance of improvisation." PL nodded, looking relieved to be away from the planet's surface. "Just make sure to include a warning about banjos." The trio shared a laugh, the tension finally easing from their shoulders. They had faced the unknown and unpredictable, guided by a tattered manual and their wits, and had come out stronger for it. As the stars whisked by, the galaxy seemed a little less daunting. They had tales to tell, lessons to share, and perhaps most importantly, a newfound respect for the power of dance. "Next time," Naren said with a smirk, "let's just stick to robots. At least they don't require dance-offs to communicate." "Agreed," Zorit and PL said in unison, and the ship sailed onward, leaving behind a planet where music, dance, and survival were strangely intertwined.